This time around, I'm heading out to the Orlando neighborhood that was home to Orlando's first castle. No, not Disney, Pine Castle. Sure, Walt's castle is the most notable one here in Orlando, but it turns out he wasn't the first one to build his kingdom in the middle of Florida swampland. In 1869, a pioneer named Will Wallace Harney traveled by covered wagon with his wife Mary 1,000 miles to Orlando from Kentucky.
And he was homesteading land, and so part of that was required that he improve the land and live on it to get title to it from the government.
The improvements he decided to make was building a castle. However, unlike Disney's barbarian-inspired castle, Harney's castle that he built in 1873, not nearly as majestic.
They used the native pine forest that you see around Central Florida.
It was, as the name suggests, a pine castle.
It wasn't finished, it wasn't painted or anything like that, it was unvarnished pine.
Unlike the other cabins of that era built with timbers laid horizontally, Harney would lay his vertically, giving the cabin an illusion of height.
It had a large central room that was octagonal in shape, and then it had two wings, left and right, that went north and south.
It had turrets, lookouts, and a long porch across the front that faced Lake Conway.
And it was such an unusual looking place that when people would drive by, oh, there's the Pine Castle, there's the Pine Castle.
Harney's Pine Castle would become so distinct and such a landmark that the entire region surrounding it would become known as Pine Castle. Not only did Harney's Pine Castle get attention locally, it actually got some attention on a national level. You see, before he moved here, Harney was a well-known writer for newspapers and journals across the country.
Kind of like the Mark Twain figure meets an Edgar Allan Poe, because a lot of his poems are kind of dark. The one poem that got his recognition nationally was called The Stab.
Harney would continue working here in Central Florida as a writer for newspapers and journals across the country, and he would write about the adventures of being a pioneer on the Florida frontier.
Those writings give us our first real glimpse into what it was like to live in Central Florida during the pioneer era.
And he would use the dateline, Pine Castle.
And people across the country just ate up these letters that he would write.
After acquiring the land, Harney decided that he was going to take the 160 acres and subdivide it and sell it to settlers coming to the area. By this time, his writings about the exotic wildlife, abundance of fishing and hunting next to Lake Conway, had been sparking the imaginations of adventurers, and it turned out to be the perfect marketing to convince others to come to the land of alligators, mosquitoes, and hurricanes.
So a lot of his stories were kind of funny, kind of cutesy, folksy, things like that, that would appeal to a broad audience and make them want to at least come down to visit and hopefully buy some property of their own.
And now the name Pine Castle in Orlando still remains. Unfortunately, the Pine Castle does not.
Quite simply, wood burns, pine burns. And while he was away at work one day, the castle caught fire. The turrets survived until the early 1900s.
And now, a metal plaque stands adjacent to the space Harney's Pine Castle once stood on the shores of Lake Conway. So there you go, there's the story of Pine Castle and another man just eccentric enough to see the potential of turning Florida swampland into his kingdom for his castle. Until next time, I'm Rich Pope, and this has been a Greetings from Pine Castle.